Hello and welcome to the Byline podcast. My name is Adrian Goldberg, and this time, Zarina Zabrisky's latest dispatch from Ukraine. We're going to be hearing about life under Russian bombardment in Kherson and Zarina's visit to the east and the north of the country, close to the Kherson region, where the Ukrainians have made surprise advances inside Russia. We're also going to be hearing more about how the Byline Times was named as a source by the FBI in an indictment against suspected Russian agents working to spread disinformation in the States, the UK, and the West. Welcome, Zarina. Great to have you on, as always. Just tell me about life in Kherson at the moment, where you are.
Hi, Adrian. Great to talk to you again. And I really loved the way you summed up the subjects for this talk, because seemingly as they might look not connected, they are actually intertwined. And it would be hard not to talk about one aspect and miss the other for me. And I will get into what's happening in Kherson at the moment. But I just want to say that we are looking at the modern warfare, and we are looking at different aspects of it. It's multifaceted. So we have the conventional warfare, which I will cover, telling you about the situation in the south of Ukraine, in the Kherson region, where I am currently reporting from, and the north, very north of Ukraine, which is the Sumy region, very close to the Kursk region of the Russian Federation, which I visited last month. And at the same time, there's a different dimension to this modern warfare, which is a hybrid warfare, of which the Byline Times have been always pioneering the reports. And that is why the Byline Times have actually come up in the FBI research and the Department of Justice of the United States indictment that came up actually when I was in the Sumy region. So it's very rich, it's very complex, it's very modern, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to bring it all together.
And we're grateful to you for sharing it with us, Zarina, because I think for many people in the UK, in the West generally, the concept of hybrid war, although we've spoken about it a lot on this podcast and you've written about it in Byline Times, is still an unusual concept. It's not something that people really understand. They understand war on the battlefield, and clearly Russia has been waging war in Ukraine since 2014, full-scale invasion in 2022. But this hybrid war, which involves misinformation, which involves perhaps oligarchs who are obedient to Putin, working to spread Russian influence in the West, that's also been going on for years.
Exactly. And there's much more to the hybrid war than just disinformation. There's lawfare, there's ecocide, basically every aspect of modern life as we know it, economical, political, you take it, and it's been weaponized and becomes a part of the war. So in a way, it's very conceptual, and I'm very grateful for everyone who is able and willing to open up their mind and, so to say, upgrade their knowledge. We are in a paradigm shift right now, and it's a bit more clear to me because, let's face it, I made it my specialty, my profession about 10 years ago when the Byline Times also started to confront the other side, the Kremlin, with the hybrid war, not really starting, but taken the full power. And we've been researching it since then. So, of course, it's more clear to us. Also, I have, some may say, disadvantage. I say for journalists, an advantage of being at the front line. So I can report to you how these things connect in real life. So thank you for listening, and let me break it down for you. I'll start with the south, where I am currently in the front line city of Kherson. I'm about 1 kilometer from the front line, which is the Dnieper River here. And in the place where I am currently, it's about anywhere from 400 to 800 meters wide. So, up to 1 mile for my American listeners. It's very, very close. Basically, we can see the Russians on the other side. And these days, they found a new way to see us. There's eyes in the skies. We have discussed that before. If you've missed it, there are drones working sometimes in pairs, lately in groups. There would be a surveillance drone, which is just a commercial drone, which you might buy somewhere in a supermarket and use for wedding videography. It's adapted, of course, but it's in real time sending the video signal to the remote pilot sitting on the other side of the river, somewhere in an abandoned Ukrainian dacha, cottage house. And from there, they can see very well what they are doing. They see the street in the city of Kherson. And these days, it's any street in the coastal area, and it could be a street downtown. And now they can fly as far as 15 and up to 30 kilometers inland, because they found the way to adapt these drones with additional batteries and retransmitters. I'm not going to go on technical on you, but there are ways to do it now. They also found the way to break the frequencies when they change it. And so they kind of, so to say, break the jammers. And so Ukrainian drone air defense is unable to stop them. So that surveillance drone will come and hover over, say, a flower kiosk, as it happened the day before yesterday. And then there will be a cafe across the street, and there will be several people sitting there having their dinner. It's still nice and warm here. And say at 5 p.m., because past 6, 7 p.m., there's not a person in the street. It's too scary. And once this pilot sees a target, and they definitely see civilian targets, not military, they will summon an attack drone. And these are first-person view drones, FPV drones, which will either drop explosives of different kind, anything from grenade to a Coca-Cola can with explosives, or it will do a kamikaze trick and just crash to its death, blowing up whatever it is targeting. And that's what happened at the flower kiosk the other day. And they killed some pigeons there. And some of the, like a painful detail, there's a lady who sells flowers there. She wasn't there. She already closed her kiosk. But every morning, this lady feeds the pigeons. She has like breadcrumbs that she spreads on the asphalt. And when I came to report, I went there, and there were all these crumbs, and the lady was almost in tears. She said, the pigeons wouldn't come. They are too scared. You also see the dogs who live around there. There are a lot of wild dogs, and they are avoiding the place where the drone hit. The animals know. And needless to say, people are trying to avoid being hit, but it's very difficult. I can tell you, Adrian, from my own experience, that just moving around Kherson these days is nothing like I have done in my life. You have to stay close to the walls and find the trees. So you run in under the trees. You have to listen to the buzzing in the sky, because if you are negligent and you don't hear it, it will hit you. And sometimes you hear wasps or bees, or sometimes you hear, the electric source, which are here because people have to fix the windows, the broken windows, and they saw the plywood. And you hear the sounds and you can get confused. And so you run, and this feeling of a wild animal being hunted is not a good feeling, especially now that they're coming in groups. On Saturday, there was a day, the city day, like a birthday of Kherson. Of course, there were absolutely no celebrations in the street, but there were a couple of inside, I wouldn't call them events, but some gatherings of friends. And so at our yoga studio, several people didn't make it because they couldn't leave their house. The drones were hovering above their houses. Pretty much every friend of mine had their car damaged or destroyed by drones. Pretty much everyone was at least contused or injured, or in the very least hit from the drones several times. I hit from the drones myself. So it's ongoing. Today, I heard the sound every hour several times, whether outside or inside. And here we get the connection. You might want to ask me, what's going on in the very north of Ukraine.
Well, go on, Zarina. You've set me up then. What's going on in the very north of Ukraine?
Well, in the Sumy region, I wish I could tell you things were different, but they are not. I spent about a week or 10 days there just 2 weeks ago, and I found exactly the same situation in the villages close to the border. And if here in the south, in the Kherson region, we have the river as the front line, in the Sumy region, it's the land, it's the forest. So the front line is very blurred. There's not one line. And there, not only the Russian military drones target and attack the civilians, and we were talking about the hybrid war, they weaponize the environment. So here in Kherson, there are also cases of incendiary devices being dropped from the drones. There in the south, in the Sumy region, there's same Coca-Cola cans that are packed with napalm-like substance. And if here in Kherson, they are burning villages and suburbs and residential houses, in the Sumy region, they burn villages and residential areas, and they burn the forests.
And this is when you referred earlier to ecocide, then destroying the forest between the Sumy region and the next door region, which is Kursk in Russia.
Exactly, a great point. And surprisingly, for me, and probably for everyone, the Russian military, they don't differentiate really between the Ukrainian villages on the Ukrainian side of the border, of the front line, and the Russian villages on their own territory. There's a village Kazinka, which is few kilometers, 3 or 4 kilometers from the village Lukashivka, right on the border. And they had been targeted equally by the aerial guided bombs, and also a lot of houses were burned down in both villages. And that's happening all along the front line. The forests are burning. It's an unprecedented wildfire situation. I worked with the fire brigade. I was embedded with the military unit, and they took me to a Yamna village, and we went to a forest fire. And the smell there, Adrian, it's a wrong comparison. But my first impression was like you're stepping in a very nice, fine sauna with the pine wood is burning. And it's not a sauna, it's actually the forest burning. And the fireman told me that they have not seen anything like this, and it is very likely that it had been set on fire on purpose by the drones or by artillery fire. And later on, as I was doing research for an article, I found the conclusions already by investigators, and they actually find those jars of liquid fuel that would explode and set everything on fire and ignite once they fall from the FPV drones. So I spoke to several people there in the villages whose houses were gone, burned completely. And I also spoke to the journalists and to Ukrainian military who went to the other side of the border. As you know, there's a successful Kursk offensive going on right there in the region. So it was a very interesting experience and conversations. Apparently, there are reports of the locals being very brainwashed to the point where they can't tell the reality from delusion. And many believe that Ukraine attacked Russia and so forth. And here we go back to our hybrid war and to the realm of the information warfare. The other day, Maria Zakharova, who is official representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, falsely claimed that Russian citizens are being abducted by the Ukrainian army in the Kursk region. And there she used the Kremlin signature propaganda trick, claiming that this is a Nazi move, comparing this practice to World War II and so forth. We've been to that before. They started doing it 2014, making associations with the Nazis. As we all know, according to pretty much every report that I've got being there in a very close proximity, these reports are false. And Russian authorities did not respond to the Ukrainian request to evacuate the civilians to the Russian Federation territory. And now they're claiming that Ukrainians abduct them. In fact, Ukrainians cannot move these people without their agreement and without the Russian authorities' agreement. So, as you could see, the claims are being made, and the domestic public opinion and the international public opinion are being manipulated. And all of this is happening in the broader context of the preparation for the US election, because as we know, the battle is ongoing there.
And you've talked about the brainwashing of Russian citizens in the West, in the United States, here in the UK, attempts to undermine democracy in its broadest sense, but also to give a false narrative of the war as well. And we've talked a little bit about this previously on this podcast with Peter Jukes about the doppelganger case. And for people who don't know, doppelganger really is a version of cyber squatting, isn't it? It's where you take over the domain or you approximate the domain of an established news source, whether that might be the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Byline Times. And so when people click on to that website or what they think is that website, instead of getting the real thing, they get Russian disinformation. And the FBI have issued an indictment, and the Byline Times was mentioned in that indictment in a positive way. We are a source for the FBI in seeking to break this Russian disinformation.
Well, yes and no. There will be some corrections to what you just said. To make it a little more simple to understand, doppelganger means a double. And so the Russian information technologists, they're called, are making a fake website. And so there will be just one letter in the address that is wrong. So like instead of Washington Post, there will be Washington Posta. And there will be just one letter, and people usually don't look at it. And when you click, you see the articles that real, actual Washington Post never published and never wrote. And that's how disinformation is served to the people. Also, I wrote the article about the doppelganger sites in February, actually from Kherson, but I had sources in the States that were working on it. And there was quite a technical, somewhat arcane article that I felt not many people read. Apparently, it was read by the Russians. Not only they read it, they have translated it into Russian. So one fine morning in the Sumy region, I wake up and I get an email from Peter Jukes. And I see my article translated to Russian. And I understand, I speak Russian and Ukrainian. And I just woke up. So I have no idea what is going on. Why is there FBI statement with my article in Russian? It took me a while to figure it out because there are 277 pages in the Department of Justice indictment. So to make long story short, the Russians found about 10 articles about doppelganger campaign. There were not very many. There was Le Monde, Spiegel, Byline Times, my article, some department from Germany. And so they put together the 10 articles and translated them from different languages into Russian, put together a package called The Collective West, that's us, The Collective West, confronting or fighting our doppelganger campaign, and took this package to the Kremlin. So our article, Byline Times, my article, was brought to the Kremlin, to the administration of President. I don't know if Putin read it, and I don't care, to be honest with you. I don't even know if he's capable of understanding it because he's not on the internet. He still uses pen and paper, and he might not be on the subject. But the presidential administration did look into it, And then, lucky for the FBI and for all of us, there was a leak. And this documents the package of the collective West fight and the resistance that we were part of, along with their own correspondence, where they plot. And it's like a bad movie, like Dr. Strangelove. It's really bad. It's arcane. And, you have to be there, and it's hard to believe that it's actually happening. Somebody sitting and thinking, oh, I'll make the New York Post or the San Francisco Chronicle, like change one letter in the title and everybody will believe me. But nevertheless, they sit there. Not only they were talking about it, they were writing about it. So all of this is leaked, translated back into English. And then the FBI agent, whose name is blurred in the indictment, does this huge 277 pages report. And then all of this is released to the Department of Justice. And then it goes into the public domain, and anybody can read it. We can actually, along with this podcast, when you're ready, I can share the link. Anybody who's interested in doppelganger or suffers from sleepless nights can put themselves to sleep reading 277 pages of this. So that's basically what happened. It's not straightforward, but what's important here, that it's also, just like with everything else, it's not one tiny bad story. It's a part of the puzzle, because on the same day as this indictment was made public, there was another indictment on the Tenet media campaign. And I don't believe we have time to go into it now, but I will give you good lead. In October, the Byline Time print edition is coming up, and there will be the breakdown of all of this material of Tenet. There will be my big follow-up on the social design agency, which was behind this whole doppelganger campaign. There will be a very peculiar explanation of what the Tenet means. It's actually from a Christopher Nolan movie, Tenet. And there are fascinating sci-fi, real-life connections there. So if you're in that kind of thing, or again, suffer from insomnia, I really recommend.
Well, listen, we have discussed on this podcast both Doppelganger and Tenet with Peter Jukes and with Pekka K from the wonderful Vatnik Soup. But as you say, there will be a fuller breakdown in the next print edition of Byline Times. And this podcast, in case you don't know, is funded by subscriptions to the Byline Times. We would urge you to take out a subscription. It's a fantastic monthly news publication. Just head over to bylinetimes.com and take out a subscription if you can. And you can read much more from Zarina. So, Zarina, thank you for updating us from Kherson. We will, of course, touch base with you again in the near future. But for now, thank you. It's fascinating as always. And all I can say is I hope you stay safe and see you back on the streets of the UK, which we have done. We've met once or twice, haven't we, before? So I look forward to catching up with you in person again. Thank you so much.
Much safer streets, Adrian. I'm looking forward.
Great. So thank you, Zarina. And don't forget as well, this podcast is part of bylineaudio.com. We got some fantastic podcasts. We have Adventures in Americana with Hardeep Matharu and Bonnie Greer. We have Utter Bollocks with Otto English and John Mitchinson. So to get the full Byline experience, head over to bylineaudio.com. This episode of the Byline podcast has been produced in Birmingham by me, Adrian Goldberg, and Harvey White. We'll see you again very soon. But for now, thanks for listening. See you soon. Cheers.
Byline Audio.